And there is such a thing as a good death, quote unquote, and how you sort of have control over that. So that's a whole different conversation. But, really, next slide. Today we're really going to talk about um, why end of life discussions are so important, the difference between an advanced healthcare directive and a POLST, and some other tools that are used, and how do you start the conversation? Because the fact is, these are really important because number one, it's a question on the IPP. So any service coordinator out there, as we're doing the IPP, we're supposed to be asking, um, has there been a discussion about an advanced healthcare directive? And so realizing that a lot of people may not even know what that is. So, but there are some other reasons why these end of life discussions are really important. So unplanned, unexpected health crises, they just throw a monkey wrench into the plan. And honestly, nobody gets to make good decisions when their back is against the wall. And so planning is always really advantageous. Um, sort of uh, 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 one of the big things that I think is so in alignment with what we do at Westside is, the focus is so much with person-centered planning. Well, person-centered planning, and we'll talk about that. That person-centered planning is about how we plan for our life, and that also includes how we want the end of our life to go. And so, by having these end-of-life discussions, the individual gets to voice while they still can. They get to voice what they want, what's important to them, what um, as they age, if they end up with them, even folks who have the ability to communicate their wants and needs in the early parts of their life, if they get dementia, they may not be able to communicate those things. So having this as part of a plan is really important. It's actually really important for all of us. Um, it's funny, when I started working, I immediately got an advanced healthcare directive. I didn't have one in place. And then I heard the story, and I'll probably date myself, but who remembers Terry Schiavo in Florida, right? She was 26 years old. She went into cardiac arrest because of a potassium deficiency, I think it was. She was oxygen deprived for 5 minutes and had irreparable brain damage. And then her husband, they kept her on life support for several years, like 7 or 8 years, I think. And then her husband wanted to remove life support, and her parents refused. And there was a court battle. She was on life support for 15 years. She didn't actually officially die until 2005. And the accident had happened in 1990. So a part of it is, how do you want, how do you, and as an individual, want to dictate how you live and how you die? So I actually got an advanced healthcare directive right away. And I've made my wishes very clear. And I suggest, I personally, I think it's important for everyone. But one of the things that came up, and why this talk was something that seemed to be really needed, was I have an individual on my caseload who's quite young, and she has very complex medical needs. And her mother called me in a panic about, she said, we're Orthodox Jewish. And if they put her on life support, we're not allowed to remove her. So it added a different sense of urgency, which is why when I was talking to Stephen, it seemed like a good conversation to have. So why are end of life discussions important? So that they can communicate their desires, their needs, and it's part of a person-centered plan. Those are the primary reasons. Okay, next slide. So we talked about a person-centered approach. You all know what person-centered thinking is. End of life wishes should definitely be included. What's important to that person? What's important for that person? Those are conversations that are, if you think about end of life, what's important to somebody at the end of life. Who do they want around them? Who do they want? What kind of things do they want in the room with them when they are dependent on everybody around them and maybe are not able to communicate? So it makes sense in our process that we ask this question. So let's get to next slide soon. Let's get to what an advanced healthcare directive is, and then there's another tool that I want to bring up. So an advanced healthcare directive, it's a written plan stating what healthcare treatments you would want and the ones you don't want, in case you're not able to speak for yourself. It designates who will speak for you, and it's a legal document. So it's a tool um, that helps you think through and communicate your choices. It's a roadmap. I like to call it a roadmap. So there are two parts of it. There's the living will part, which is the legal document that says what your wishes are for medical treatment. And then there's the medical power of attorney part, which is the legal form which states who you want to make the decisions. It's the naming of the agent, right? So naming a family member, a friend, or whoever, to make those decisions if you're not able to make them. So there are two aspects of it. It is, like I said, it's a legal document. You can, I don't know if anyone here has seen an advanced healthcare directive. Stephen, do you want to pull it up? And one of the questions, Natasha, I think you brought up a question about at our meeting, was it last week or the week before, about disposition of the body, right? So what happens after the person dies? And part of an advanced healthcare directive, it actually includes who gets to make those decisions about your body. So
that is so important. So I'm so thankful that you're talking about it today, because that's one of the most heartbreaking things that we experience when caring for somebody after they've passed away, and there's nobody who's able to make those decisions for them.
And Natasha, you can probably speak more on some of the horror stories that, you hear stories about people who the body's been in the morgue for weeks, right? And they can't move forward to the next step, which, aside from the feeling that any of us would get from that feeling, right? Of, oh, I can't imagine a body being stuck in the morgue that long. Imagine what it's doing to the family and anyone who needs to mourn this individual. They can't move forward. They can't go on with the process of mourning the person they love. And so having something in place that gives someone the permission, the legal authority to state, what needs to be done with the body is really important. And I think that's really small on my screen, so I don't know how much. And we can send that to you so that you can see. This is just a sample I got off of the California Advanced Healthcare Directive, because they do differ from state to state. But I think it's on. Oh no, it's the first page. It lists. It's consent or refuse consent to any care, treatment, service, or procedure to maintain, diagnose, or otherwise affect a physical or medical. You can select or discharge healthcare providers. You can approve or disapprove diagnostic tests, surgical procedures, and programs of medication. You can direct the provision, withholding, or withdrawal of artificial nutrition and hydration, all other forms of care, including CPR. You can donate your organs, tissues, parts, authorize an autopsy, and direct disposition of remains. Though these are all things that can be allowed within this advanced healthcare directive that you can give someone permission for. So it really is a good thing to have. So that's so an advanced healthcare directive is a great tool. It's one of the tools. It's a great tool, and you can have a fancier advanced healthcare directive by getting an attorney to draw one up, or you can use the form. It's a fillable form on their website. And the advanced healthcare directive form only gets activated if you're seriously ill or injured and unable to speak for yourself. So I still make all my own decisions, even though I have an advanced healthcare directive. I make all my own decisions, but if I'm not able to speak for myself, i.e., I get, God forbid, in a car accident, and or any number of things that happens, and I'm not able to communicate even temporarily, I know that somebody then can act on my behalf. Um, and I just saw Sylvia. Yes, your primary care physician can also get an advanced healthcare directive form for you, and can help you fill that out. And that's actually, I always refer people to, it's not a conversation I would have with our people. It's a conversation you want to refer them to their physicians. I mean, I ask the questions, but it's not something that we're not in the position to give them our opinion, right? So, um, I, with the individual I spoke to, the mother, when she was asking about what she should do, I encouraged her to talk to her daughter's primary care physician. And I also encouraged her about an advanced healthcare directive. I also encouraged her to talk about a pulse, which we'll talk about in a second. Um, because a pulse has a sense of urgency to it, and because of that specific situation. But again, I referred her to her primary care physician. Next slide. So, why do you need an advanced healthcare directive? So, it includes wishes and preferences. It includes choices regarding end of life healthcare decisions, medical treatment, what you want and what you don't want. It really allows you to be in the to be in the driving. What's the expression? To be in the driver's seat, right? To be in the driver's seat, um, for your own life. Um, your wishes will be known, and they're only that tool will only be used if you're unable to speak for yourself. And as we talked about Terry Schiavo, it can happen to anyone at any age. There's also a POLST, which we'll talk about. There are also different kinds of things, which again, the doctor would be the person to describe. Is it do not? There's a difference between do not resuscitate, a DNR, and a DNI, which is a do not intubate. So, do not resuscitate means I don't want you to give me CPR. I don't want you to put me on a ventilator. I don't want anything. A do not intubate means I want you to do CPR and I want you to give me any cardiac medications that might restart my heart, but I don't want you to intubate me. That's the a DNI is only stopping. Personally, I'm a full code because my feeling is do everything you can. I'm still young enough, healthy enough that I don't have any, conditions that would make me not want to continue, right? Or, I'm not end of life. And so I'm a full code. But then I have also directions afterwards of how long. I'll give you an example. So a woman I worked with who I learned so much from, she was a thanatologist, which is the study of death and dying, actually. And her husband, he was 62. He wasn't on Medicare yet. Black belt in Aikido, very healthy, agile, amazing guy, right? Still practicing, teaching dentistry. And he went outside their house. It was Christmas Eve and it was raining. And their house had a skylight that was leaking. And so he climbed up on a ladder um, to put a tarp over so that it would stop the leak until, they could get repairmen out. And he slipped on the ladder and fell headfirst down. Thankfully, they had already done advanced healthcare directives because of what she did as a profession. And he fell headfirst. And they rushed him to UCLA Ronald Reagan. They had to remove a part of his skull to allow the brain to swell because otherwise the brain would have been damaged additionally by swelling, right? So they need to give room. So the brain was a little swollen, swelling. Couldn't even pronounce it. The brain was swelling, and as over time, then they replaced that part of the skull, and then they monitored. So he was intubated. He was full code. He had everything done to him to keep him alive. And then over a period of with a lot of consultations with doctors, with their rabbi, with the family, the doctors say the brain can do a lot of healing up to about 12 to 15 months. There's still a lot of healing the brain will do on its own. So they wanted to give it the full extent of how long. And it was almost 2 years later where it was determined by everyone that there would be no further improvement, and they decided to remove life support. And that was written in his Advance Healthcare Directive, that he wanted everything to be done. But then, after a period of time when all the doctors concurred, if there was no ability for improvement, he did not want to live on a ventilator, or he did not even want to live on a feeding tube. And so they removed life support, and hospice was brought in, um, and he died peacefully at home like 10 days later. And what was wonderful about him having an advanced healthcare directive is it helped the entire family make that decision. That those were his wishes, and they knew they were following his wishes. And so, even though they were mourning and grieving the decision they had to make, they knew they were making the right one. So that's really, do you have a map? Do you know what you want to happen? And I'm saying this really to all of you, because my feeling is if you're all comfortable with it, it makes it a lot easier to ask other people, do you have an advanced healthcare directive? If you're feeling skittish about it, and or you don't know what it is, it's really hard to be able to ask that question with any confidence. So I invite everybody to look at it for their own lives as well. All right, next slide. And the thing about the map is, the fact is, nobody, like I said, nobody makes good decisions when their back is against the wall. So if you know what you're going to want when the time comes, when the emotions are high, when the grieving is real, you're going to make better decisions. So let's talk about some limitations of advanced healthcare directives. So they may not be available when needed. So that's a conversation to make sure, the people that matter, your doctors, your hospital of choice, that they have on your file that you have an advanced healthcare directive. Sometimes it's not readily available in patient charts. Also, you saw the look of it, right? So it can be lengthy. It can be 5 pages long. That's a little harder for doctors to, when they're busy. Doctors tend to not look at long forms. It doesn't immediately transfer or translate into an MD order. It's not a doctor's order. It is, so the doctors then have to create a separate order. And it may not be specific enough. And the other thing that's interesting is if it's not specific enough, it can be overridden by a doctor. So that's where, it's good to, you definitely want to have it, but those are some things to be mindful of. So this is a POLST, and I know it's hard to read. That's also one of the attachments we'll send you. It stands for Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's a medical order. It helps give people with serious illness more control over their care during a medical emergency. The reason is that every POLST is printed on pink paper, hot pink. So in the hospital charts, in the paramedics, everybody knows in the state of California to look for the pink paper. And if the pink paper is there, that is a doctor's order. It is mandated by law in California. They have to obey this order. And it makes sure you get the care you want, and make sure you also don't get the treatments that you don't want. And we can talk a little bit more about POLST. Stephen, go ahead and turn. It actually started a while ago, but it's really now very well known in California. I like to see it paired with an advanced healthcare directive, because I think an advanced healthcare directive also can, an advanced healthcare directive names the agent. So a POLST does not name somebody. It's just the doctor's order of what's to be done. It doesn't have any connection with who's going to speak for you. So you still need an advanced healthcare directive. So it's a doctor's order recognized by the entire medical system. It's a portable document. It goes everywhere. People make like 10, 15 copies. You make sure everybody has one. Make sure it's at your hospital of choice and all the doctors. You can keep it folded up in your wallet. You can, do whatever. It's brightly colored. and it's standardized for the entire state of California. So here, San Francisco, wherever you are in California, the bright pink form is the POLST. It started in 1991 in Oregon, actually, expanded more than half the US. In more than half the US, a POLST is considered a legal document. In California, it is considered a legal document. And as I said, it is mandatory that they follow the orders of the physician. And the studies have shown that POLST is really effective in providing care that's consistent with somebody's wishes. So, some facts: it's voluntary. Some folks in facilities, a lot of times when people move in, even in the general population, if you move into like assisted living, they'll ask you if you want to fill out a POLST, and encourage you to reach out to your doctor about it. It's not mandatory. They're not allowed to mandate it, even in a facility. And in all fairness, a POLST actually, it's not, a POLST doesn't necessarily mean do not resuscitate. It may say, yes, do X, Y, and Z, but I don't want you to do this. I don't want long-term into, I don't want to be on a ventilator. I don't want to be placed on a ventilator, but go ahead and give me CPR. Or it can say do everything. So it is, there are no limitations to what you can state on the POLST in terms of medical treatment. It's really for people who are seriously ill or have advanced frailty. I don't have a POLST. I don't need one at this point in my feeling is, because I'm full code. So that's going to be, hospitals will naturally go full code. They naturally will try everything, right? So a POLST, if you want them not to do that, that's when you need to be very assured of having a POLST. If there's something that you want to stop them from doing, and particularly, like I said, with the individual on my caseload, if there's a sense of urgency that if they screw up and put her on a ventilator by accident, the family is totally stuck. So, for those who don't have a religious or a cultural problem with removing someone from life support, you're somebody making somebody not seeing the Advance Healthcare Directive and putting somebody on a ventilator, and then the family saying, no, we don't want that. Okay, we'll take them off the ventilator. They made a mistake. They can correct that. There are certain instances where families would not be able to correct that mistake.
Sylvia, we do have a question.
Yeah, Sylvia.
Did you want to go ahead and unmute?
No, my question was, so since this is the POLST is a doctor's order or physician's order,
Mm-hmm.
would it contain more medical information? Like, I'm trying to understand the difference between the Advance Directive and this. So for instance, if it's a doctor's order, would it say due to some medical condition, like not to use a certain medication or not to use a certain type of treatment? Or
yeah, so it's, first of all, it's, again, you know what, can you pull it up, Stephen, maybe? And we don't have a pink version. We have a white version because it was I just got it off the internet. Let's pull it up because you'll see it's much cleaner. It is a physician's order. So it's bullet points, basically, the way they like it. The lawyers draw up the Advanced Healthcare Directive and the doctors had input in the creation of the POLST. Brevity versus, rabbiting on. So we'll pull it up, but there's boxes that you check off. You want to attempt resuscitation, CPR. You do not attempt resuscitation. You want full treatment, selective treatment, comfort-focused treatment, which is really more like hospice involvement, right? It's small, but can you see it's pretty, it's pretty basic. And then it also has places like where the Advanced Healthcare Directives are. And then there's a place for who the agent is, although legally they're just saying, yeah, there is somebody named, go look at the Advanced Healthcare Directive. This form doesn't really authorize that person. So the advantage, and I don't know if that answers your question, Sylvia.
it does. Thank you. It does.
The advantage is, again, it's a doctor's order, so it is pretty clean cut, and because it's something everybody's looking for, it makes, there are even fire departments noted, firefighters and paramedics noted when they go into a home, they know to look for papers. So if somebody has these papers, you either stick it on the refrigerator door. They have little magnets you can do, like they're called file of life, where they keep all those important documents. And that part will be, that's what they know to go look for. And that's where, and they'll look for anything. They look for a POLST, they look for a DNR, they look for anything. But the POLST it just gets everyone's attention because it's pink. And
There's also a comment in the chat.
Okay.
If you want to, any acknowledgement on, I'm having a hard time with my glasses.
They're looking to cover all expenses paid out. So that's a good question. If you're, that will supersede living trust. Payout for what? Alfredo, can you unmute?
Lifetime supply of
They're looking to collect everything that was paid out through Medi-Cal, Medicare for all expenses, that will supersede a living trust and go right into probate.
$350 for the iRobot.
So that way they go after the estate, and there's certain things that a regular living trust does not stop it.
So, and I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't know about the Medicare is not going to recover expenses. Medi-Cal does that. My knowledge, Medicare does not ever go after anyone to recover expenses, unless you have like co-pays or what have you that haven't been paid. But Medi-Cal goes to recover the amount of money it paid out for Medi-Cal services. That's part of the, and I'm not someone that can speak to that. We could probably ask, Bet Sedek would know the answer to that. I don't know if you're familiar with Bet Sedek. They're a great nonprofit that has a lot of, they do a lot of help with Medi-Cal planning and how to deal with having special needs trusts or living trusts. And well, you wouldn't have Medi-Cal in a living trust. You would have Medi-Cal in a special needs trust. So I don't know how to answer your question. I'm sorry. Stephen, do you know?
That would be something that Westside wouldn't be prepared to answer. So we would need to go ahead and we would refer you to an attorney.
Yeah.
Like Beth said.
Anything like that, I always go attorney. It's like they're the ones that know those things.
What was the
and Bet Sedek is what?
The nonprofit you mentioned?
Yeah, it's called Bet Sedek, BET, and the second word is TZ like zebra, ED like David, EK. I think it means justice in Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And if you need that
they're great.
information, go ahead, send me an email, and I will go ahead and I will get you their information.
Okay.
So we do have another question. Go ahead.
We do?
Sylvia.
Oh, file of life pockets. So I don't think that we have those. Do you, Stephen, think we have those, the file of life packets?
I don't believe so.
But there are organizations that you can order them. And actually, for a period of time, probably like 10 years ago, the fire departments were really into having them and dispersing them. I don't know that they're still doing that, but it'd be worth trying at the local fire department to see if they have any. And some of them, they had some that just hung on the refrigerator door. They had some that you would stick in the freezer, but you have to be careful with the ones in the freezer because if there's any condensation, if it gets in, then the ink and so I recommend the outside ones. We've had some messy inside freezer ones. Okay, so it's voluntary. It's only really for people who are seriously ill or have advanced frailty. It does not replace an advanced healthcare directive. It should be completed by the doctor, and actually, I don't even really discuss it with the family. I just encouraged her to ask her doctor, the primary care doctor, to talk to her about it. It's their thing. That's what they're there to do, and um, its POLST is not valid until it's signed by the individual or the decision maker and the doctor. It has to be signed by both, otherwise it's not valid. Once it's completed and signed, a copy goes into your medical record. You keep the original bright pink. And I always say make lots of copies and give anybody that should have it. It does not expire, but it should be reviewed because things change over time, right? You want to review it as needs change. I would think at least yearly, just kind of giving a nod to it. Yeah, it's the same. No changes there. It is a medical order, so it means licensed medical providers are required to follow the instructions. And you can void it at any time, verbally or in writing.
Sylvia, I just want to point out that I think it's really important to let people know that you can void it, you can make changes at any time. That was one of the biggest questions that I would get about a lot of forms is, is this the decision? Can I change my mind?
Correct. So Coalition for Compassionate Care in California has a great website if you want to find out more about it. It's one form for the entire state. It's not mandated. Use is not mandated, but honoring the form is mandated. Next slide. Let's see. The other thing I want to go back when I said that you can verbally or just make sure that every copy of POLST you have, you tell those people that it's voided and have them tear it up or have them write void on it. Because if you have a lot of copies around, then you want to make sure. And when I say a lot of copies, I think of like doctor's offices, hospital of choice, but also the people who would be with you, caregivers, they need to have access to it. So whether that's in their, if the person is always at home, then one at home is sufficient. But if they have a day program, we may want one to be at the day program too. Why use a POLST? So the individual's wishes are you want to make sure that their wishes are known. The Advance Healthcare Directive may not be available or may not be as easy to locate. And the wishes may not be as clearly defined in the Advance Healthcare Directive. And it really allows the healthcare professionals to know what the wishes are immediately because of that bright ink nature. So especially if you can't undo putting somebody on a ventilator. So next slide. So we're going to talk about who benefits. So chronic progressive illness, serious health condition, medically frail, those with certain cultural or religious beliefs. And honestly, before this came up in a conversation, it never occurred to me that somebody's cultural beliefs or religious beliefs would not allow them to undo a mistake, right? To undo putting someone, it never even occurred to me. I'd never come across it in all the time I've been doing this. I'm surprised now I'm like, well, of course, why haven't I come across it? But until this happened, so it was a good wake up call for me as well. So both are legal documents. The POLST really is there to complement the Advance Healthcare Directive. POLST doesn't, there's a place for the agent's name, but it does not authorize that agent the way an Advance Healthcare Directive does. And the Advance Healthcare Directive is, but sometimes not specific enough or readily available. So having those two, it's actually not, it's not that it's not specific enough. It probably is specific, but in an emergency situation, doctors don't have time to read through it all the way, right? So having a shorter, more abbreviated, bullet pointed order makes more sense for those situations. Next slide. So starting the conversation, here's the big, now remember, so some of this is about starting a conversation with an individual. A lot of the tools that we're going to talk about are really tools you can encourage families to look at. It's not necessary, you're not going to be having these conversations, right? Your job is to ask if they have an advanced healthcare directive and then direct them to their physician to help them make those decisions. However, there are, for your own personal life, or, there are tools that families may look for help. Families may be, how do we even talk to Johnny about this, right? So that's what some of the resources I wanted to give you guys were, things that you can pass on to family members. And those are going to be attachments we'll send to you. There's some great conversation starters and we'll talk about. So starting the conversation, first of all, this conversation really needs to be an ongoing dialogue throughout life. It's not, I think what ends up happening is a lot of people wait until someone gets sick, and then there's so many emotions involved. It's so charged, the conversation. But part of the reason is because you're in the middle of it. And if you have the conversation prior, like at your annual IPP meeting, have advanced healthcare directives been discussed? That having and honestly, from our point of view, it's really making sure that they name an agent. Who do you want to make decisions for you if you're not able to speak for yourself? And that's what an advanced healthcare directive is for. And that's a good thing to talk to then talk to their family about. And then when the family needs guidance as to how to have this conversation, the points are, you focus on the conversation. I think about, whenever I have this conversation with in my previous life, I did have these conversations with people at end of life, and it was really talking. I would start by asking what's important to them. So it goes back to person-centered thinking, right? What's important to you? What are you going to want to have? And there's a great tool for families to use when they're doing this, called, and I have it in attachment for you guys as well. It's Your Conversation Starter Guide: How to Talk About What Matters to You and Have a Say in Your Healthcare. And so there are good prompts with that. There's also, we'll talk more about, there's some other tools as well that are really helpful. 5 Wishes is one. 5 Wishes is, the 5 wishes are the person, they talk about the person I choose as my healthcare agent, my wish for the kind of medical treatment I want, my wish for how comfortable I want to be, my wish for how I want people to treat me, and my wish for what I want my loved ones to know. And the 5 Wishes is also considered a legal document in the state of California. So it can name, a lot of people have an advanced healthcare directive and they use this as a conversation starter. And a lot of people use this as their advanced healthcare directive. And that's okay too. So starting the conversation, you're really, what they're going to want to know, what you want to know, or like how does somebody feel about artificial nutrition? Now, we have a lot of individuals who are already on artificial nutrition. So that may not be a conversation that needs to be had, right? And that brings about other complications at end of life. Same with the ventilator, right? Another great, when people are having these conversations, if it's appropriate, hospice coming in, they're great at these conversations. This is what they do. They help families and the decision makers and the individuals really understand what things will look like. It's one thing to say, yes, I want CPR. Do you know what CPR looks like for a frail body? Ribs will be cracked. There are a lot of adverse effects to some of these life-sustaining treatments. And so hospice can really help families. Same with palliative care. They're really good at helping families have conversations and decide what's right for them. Timing is everything. Like I said, not when somebody's just gotten a cancer diagnosis is not the time to say, do you have, you'd like to have an advanced healthcare directive, but you want to give them a little time to deal with their diagnosis before you jump right in and start talking about advanced healthcare directives if they've just been given a terminal diagnosis, right? So there does have to be some sensitivity. Now, the advantage, if it's part of the IPP, it does become part of the process. And if they're used to hearing it, because every year you've been asking the question, have we had, has anyone just, have you just had a discussion with your doctor about an advanced healthcare directive? Then, then it would be normal. It would be a normal part of the conversation. Use real life examples if possible. Use conversation tools like 5 wishes. Go wish cards. That's another great thing. So my sister wanted me to be her agent of healthcare. So I told her before, I said, yeah, I'm fine with that. But if you're going to do that, then we need to have a conversation. And we were going on a road trip. And so I brought go wish cards, which everyone teased us because it was like this very macabre feeling family road trip. But they were great. It's a little deck of cards. And I wish I didn't, they're actually in the office and I'm working from home today. It's a little deck of cards.
I actually have a deck here.
Oh, do you? Perfect. Stephen's got the go wish cards. And each card, can you read one of them, Stephen? Like one of the questions?
Yeah, to have someone who will listen to me.
Right. So they have.
Another one is to have my funeral arrangements made.
Yeah. And so you put them in like which are the ones that are important to you? And you go through the card, like what's important to you? And because it's more of a playful approach, it's a great conversation starter. We start talking, I start teasing my sister, like, let's have cocktail parties. We'll bring out the go wish cards. You can actually learn a lot about people by reading these cards, which is actually kind of neat. But anyway.
I know it sounds crazy, but my family uses them because we all get together at Christmas time. Go figure.
Yeah, perfect. It's perfect.
But it makes it a little bit lighter, and it doesn't put the heaviness of the subject in.
Exactly.
Because it's more like a game.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you're also starting the conversation early, right? So it's just normal conversation, which really takes a lot of the stigma and the fear and the discomfort away. And it's, it doesn't have to fit into one conversation. I would venture to say, I don't think these conversations should be one conversation. I think they should be lifelong conversations. And, I look at, when I said the real life examples, I also pull in movies and television. So with my family, when I'm sitting down talking, we're watching a movie and something comes up in the movie and I'll say, oh my gosh, I'm telling you now, I'm putting that in my advanced healthcare directive. I never want that. Right. So it's taking, or when the situation happened with my colleague that I shared with you, my whole family heard that story. And I told them that, sort of first of all, as a cautionary tale, don't go climbing ladders when it's raining. But number 2 was, what was going on in his situation and how grateful the family was that they knew what he wanted. And so I was really stressing to my family that they needed to get their advanced healthcare directives in order. I'm the downer in the family. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and I'm the one with all the.
I would also encourage folks to the more comfortable you are doing it, the more comfortable you're going to be doing it with folks that we're working with. My family gets tired of me because I practice on them all the time with stuff. So, with the go wish cards, that when I first got them, that's what we did. But we talk about these things, and now my mother's at the point where, are we going to talk about this again? And we all just laugh about it. But because I do that, I'm fairly comfortable in bringing it up with folks.
Yeah, same. And it's funny. So when I lost my father, I was in my early 20s, and my niece was in high school at the time, and we had his ashes. He was cremated in his ashes, and he had wishes of how he wanted the ashes dealt with. And um, my siblings were, it wasn't written down. And so my siblings were arguing, even though he had said it to all of us, and I was really pushing for his wishes to be honored. And when we finally managed to make it happen, I looked at my nieces and the two of them, and I said, "You see the siblings I'm dealing with. I'm depending on you two to follow through with my wishes." And I at the time, my wish was I wanted my ashes. I wanted to be cremated. And I wanted my ashes scattered off the Staten Island ferry in New York. I was living in New York City at the time, and my niece, who was like 13 years old at the time, said, so I said, "So I'm putting you two in charge. You're going to be the ones." And my 13-year-old niece said, "And are you going to put in your will money so that we can make a trip to New York City?" Which we all laughed about. Now, truth be told, she is now a certified financial planner. She was our little financial planner. Even back then, she had a plan. She knew, if I'm going to follow through, I need the finances for it. I assured her, yes, I would make sure that she was taken care of. Anyway, and so encourage, and this is really our role as service coordinator. All you really need to do is to be encouraging the conversation with the physician. All this other stuff is what you do with families, with your own family. But it's important to talk about and document your wishes before you become seriously ill. All right, so next slide. Oh, and I said hospice and palliative agencies are really good at having these conversations as well. And does everyone understand hospice, the benefits of hospice? It's covered by Medicare, by Medi-Cal, by private insurance. They do pain management. They do support for the individual and the family and the decision makers, which is fabulous. They also dispel all these myths. There are a lot of myths about what happens as the body dies. They dispel myths about, you know, a lot, especially with artificial nutrition. People tend to have a very strong response to not giving people food, because it goes against our nature that we feel like we're starving them. But when somebody's body, and I'm gonna put a caveat, this is for somebody who wasn't on artificial nutrition beforehand. You are not on artificial nutrition and your body is dying. Your body goes through a process that if somebody decides to put a feeding tube in, it's going to stop the dying process. Your body has a natural process as it dies that forcing having food in artificially, and even water, putting IVs in, it stops the body from doing what it needs to do. And part of that process is releasing pain, releasing hormones that deal with pain. So our body naturally has pain relief built into the process of dying as the systems are shutting down. And when we start doing medical interventions like IV for fluids or food, we're not allowing those systems to shut down the way they normally would, and we're not giving the body the chance to do what it's meant to do. And so, and that's what hospice, I've learned so much by talking to hospice staff about the different stages of each body system shutting down. I saw it with my own father. Each system was shutting down, and he was not in pain. And part of that was his body was handling what it needed to do. So anyway, those are conversations that they can have. The food thing is a big thing in our culture, and not just our culture, but everyone has this like human need to feed. And it's probably the hardest instinct to help families through. And somebody just wrote comfort. Yeah. So the key parts of hospice, the pain management, it is there's a wonderful woman, her name is Vicki Kind, and she wrote the Compassionate Guide to Caregiving, what's it called? I have it somewhere. Compassionate Decision Making, the caregiver's path to compassionate decision making. And she's a bioethicist, and she does a lot of, she talks, if you ever have a chance to hear her speak, listen to her. She's fabulous. Her last name, Kind, totally suits her. She's just lovely. And she actually helped me learn a lot about air hunger, why oxygen is still something you would give in hospice to fight off air hunger, but what, helping, how to help families really go through that process with knowledge instead of going on feeling. Because the fact is, at end of life, when the decision makers are having to make these decisions, they're going on feelings. They're in an emotional state. And so if they have knowledge about what's actually happening, they can make good decisions, informed decisions. So anyway, and that's actually another thing. She writes a quality of life statement, which it's specific to end of life. So it might be something that's on top of, but anyway, Vicki, that was, I got my train of thought back because somebody had written on the chat box. So about comfort. So Vicki's motto, and it's something I used with the work I did at end of life, was when somebody is end of life, it is about comfort and joy. And every decision, and this is what we did with my mother, every decision we made was based on comfort and joy and removal of pain and anxiety. So when they ask, do you want this? Do you want that? Is it going to bring comfort and joy? Is it going to decrease pain and anxiety? And if the answer was yes, it would increase comfort and joy, then that was an easy answer, right? If it was going to create more anxiety or more pain or discomfort, then the answer would be no. So, and that also comes with hospital stays. One of the things with dementia, going into the hospital can be so incredibly upsetting and disorienting that the anxiety is so, it's a reason why, hospice is, a lot of people say, well, if the doctor thinks you could die within 6 months, then you qualify for hospice. That's not necessarily true. Somebody with dementia can be on hospice for years. I've known people on hospice for 3 or 4 years because of they have dementia and it's not curative. So hospice just means you're not trying to cure anymore. And so when it's appropriate, getting hospice involved, unfortunately, families think of hospice as a death sentence. They think if you bring in hospice, they're going to die in the next 5 days. And that's a misuse of that service. The service is actually meant to be there to support the family, to support the individual as they're going through this. And don't, the thing that makes me saddest is when I hear somebody was only on hospice for 3 days. And I'm thinking, they missed out. The whole family missed out on social workers, on spiritual advisors, they just miss out on everything. So the conversation tools, the 5 wishes, the Go Wish cards, the conversation project is the one that I told you about. We'll send the attachments of those. And then I think we have one more slide. Yeah. So the resources are, these are the ones that I actually talked about during the talk: the conversation starter guide, POLST, thinking ahead is another one, like it's another booklet that you can get. The Advance Healthcare Directive fillable form, 5 wishes, Go Wish cards. Quality of life statement is from Vicki Kind. Kind Ethics is her company. And then the next slide for resources. These are actually great resources to give. All of these are great resources to give families. So talking end of life with people. Actually, Australia has done some, and England have both done some great work in talking with this population about death, about end of life. And so these were some great resources I found that just were, that have sort of how to approach certain subjects, and again, not for you guys to talk with the individual, but to pass on if families are saying, how do I start this conversation with my son or daughter? These are great links you can share with them. And I think that's it.
And I will go ahead. I will send out the info. Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
I was just going to say, I will go ahead. I will send out the information to everybody who registered with an email for this training. I will go ahead and send the information out. If you don't get a copy of it, go ahead and send me an email. Let me put my email address in the chat, and I will send it to you.
Yeah. And Deborah wrote in the chat box, oh wait, there are a couple things. So File of Life we talked about, Comfort Care we talked about, Endgame and Tuesdays with Maury is fantastic. There's also a great documentary, well, there's a great book called Being Mortal, which is a fabulous conversation about a doctor talking about death. And what he as a doctor, after seeing all the medical interventions, what he wants for himself. So again, that's about helping you get comfortable with the idea. And then Deborah wrote about her own experience with hospice. Thank you for sharing that, Deborah. It really is important to have people there who can help you see what's going on in the body. That's why hospice is so valuable, and it really helps people know, and gives them peace of mind of knowing that their loved one is not suffering, that the body is doing what it needs to do.
I want to mention a book too that I share with a lot of people. This helps folks to understand death and dying. It's a children's book, but I share it with everybody, and it was instrumental to me when my partner passed away. It's called The Fall of Freddie the Leaf. It's a story about life for all ages. It's a really good book, and it really helps people to understand, and it gives people comfort. So that's one of the things that you might want to suggest to folks too, to help understand.
Yeah, it is a great book. I forgot that one completely. Now, Alfredo, you mentioned when siblings don't agree. So this is where it gets complicated, and this is when getting hospice involved can be really helpful. They work with complex family dynamics. This is where all the hurt feelings come out and all the disagreements, and that's why having a conversation before somebody gets sick is so important. It helps keep families on track with what somebody's wishes are.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for coming. If you have any suggestions, if you'd like to hear more on the subject, go ahead, send me an email. I can go ahead and I can see if I can bring Sylvia back, or if I can bring other speakers in to talk on the subject. I know it's one of those things that's really uncomfortable for some folks, and I think doing trainings like this will really help you to become more comfortable and to help bring this back to the folks that we serve. So thank you all for coming.
I think, Stephen, I think just stressing, the more you're comfortable with this, the easier it's going to be as a service coordinator. And if you want practice, if you want to do like practice rounds, call me. I think that a lot of it too is really just, it really is getting comfortable and saying and asking the question, and then, again, you don't have to have the hard conversation. It's really just being able to direct them to somebody who can help them with that.
The other thing that I can offer, just because I was our aging specialist for so many years, I have in the past offered to come out to meetings and to sit in on meetings just to help you start that conversation, or even start the conversation with you so that you can give you a better idea and make it a little bit more comfortable for you. So I can still extend myself to do that. So if you need assistance, if you need just somebody to come along with you, I'm more than willing to do that.
And that it's important for even our people on our caseloads who are children. So
Definitely. Thank you, everyone.
all right. Thanks. Have a good day.